Hey everyone, I've been way too busy lately, and honestly, way too lazy to make another video. I know a lot of you have been supporting me like crazy, watching my videos over and over again, and I really do appreciate it, so thank you. Now get yourself comfortable, pull that blanket over you, turn on the fan, and let's get into some more creepy stories here on Channel. For the first story, I'm going to start with something that happened to me. A while back, I went to Mungden with my cousin. At first, everything was completely normal. My cousin had rented a little homestay near a forest road. The area around Mungden gets incredibly dark, especially once the sun goes down, and there are quite a few abandoned villas scattered around the area. We got there at around 3 in the afternoon. After we ate and got settled, it was already about 5:30. We were bored, so we decided to go for a walk along the forest road near a few restaurants. It wasn't really close to our homestay. We were just wandering around, taking pictures of some of the abandoned villas. Then we came across this huge villa. It actually looked surprisingly new compared to the others. So, of course, we decided to go inside and take a look. We took out our phones and started taking pictures. Now, my family has this one little superstition. It's not exactly a strict rule, more like something we're always warned about. We're told not to leave our hair down and wander around outside after 5 p.m., because apparently that's when you're more likely to attract a wandering spirit. And guess what? That evening, both my cousin and I had our hair down while we were wandering around inside that villa. We eventually left and got back to the homestay around 6:30 p.m. We showered, changed our clothes, and went about our evening like normal. Nothing seemed strange at all. At least, not yet. My cousin fell asleep before me because I usually have trouble sleeping. It was around midnight when I finally managed to drift off. But not long after that, I suddenly felt like I couldn't breathe. It felt like someone was squeezing my throat, and I could actually feel the pressure. It wasn't just a dream. I could feel something tightening around my neck. I immediately sat up and grabbed my phone, trying to calm myself down. I told myself it was probably just my imagination. Maybe I was half asleep. Then, about 15 minutes later, I heard something tapping on the window. Knock, knock, knock. And let me make this clear. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a tree branch. It sounded like a person's hand, like actual knuckles tapping against the glass. And the strangest part was that it sounded like whoever was outside wanted me to come out. Around 2 in the morning, I finally managed to close my eyes again. But then it happened. I couldn't breathe. Again. Except this time, I could see it. Something was squeezing my neck while pressing its weight down on top of me. Its face was completely black. Its hair was long, messy, and tangled, covering everything. I couldn't see a single feature on its face. I didn't know what else to do, so I apologized silently in my head. 5 minutes later, I suddenly woke up. I checked my phone. It was around 2:30 a.m. I couldn't sleep anymore. I just lay there, tossing and turning, waiting for morning. The next day, I asked my cousin if she'd heard anything during the night. She said no. She hadn't heard a thing. Not the knocking. Not anything. That's when I started thinking maybe I was simply more spiritually sensitive than she was. Maybe whatever was there had chosen me instead. But when I told my cousin what happened, she completely freaked out. Then we started thinking about that villa again. Maybe there really was a spirit there. Maybe we had walked into someone's place without permission. And maybe whatever was inside didn't appreciate that. When I got home, I went through all the pictures we'd taken of the villa. And this is the part that really got to me. Every single picture was blurry. Oh. After that, I learned my lesson. I don't wander around strange places anymore. And I definitely don't just walk into abandoned houses or other people's property without permission. These days, my cousin and I are doing a little better. Maybe we're not as spiritually vulnerable as we used to be, or at least I hope so. Now, let's move on to the second story. This one is about a woman from Yenbai who came to me for a fortune-telling reading. Honestly, every time I turned over another card, my shoulders felt heavier. I pulled exactly 10 cards, and all 10 of them were dark. By the time I got through them, my whole body felt weak. My hands and legs were trembling, but I still forced myself to finish the reading. When I was done, the woman told me that everything I'd said was accurate. Then she told me her own story. She said her grandfather had been a ritual practitioner who worshipped spirit soldiers. He had one very strict rule in his family. His daughters, daughters-in-law, and granddaughters were never allowed to enter his shrine room. He had warned them about it very carefully. He told them that women were absolutely forbidden from entering that room, no matter what happened. Then, exactly 3 months later, one afternoon, the family realized that he hadn't come out of the shrine room. They remembered his warning immediately. No matter what happened, none of the women were allowed to go inside. Someone else had to go in and bring him out. So a neighbor rushed inside and carried him out. And when they saw him, blood was coming from his eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. The blood was black, and his eyes wouldn't fully close. Later, the family came to believe that he had simply grown old and physically weak. He didn't want his children and grandchildren to suffer because of him, so he kept forcing himself to hold on. Eventually, he became completely exhausted, and the spirit soldiers consumed his soul. Honestly, I was shocked when I heard this story, too. It's one of those stories that sounds impossible to believe. But after hearing everything she told me, I honestly didn't know what to think. And now for the third story. This one is strange. It might have been cold outside, but something that shouldn't be human shouldn't be able to hold your hand and still feel warm. I thought I was holding a real person's hand, until I slowly realized that I wasn't holding a person's hand at all. And the scariest part, the demon wasn't someone else. The demon was me. When I saw its face, just one eye, a mouth full of sharp, jagged teeth, grinning at me as it tilted its head toward me, I should have been terrified enough to let go. But instead, I started chanting Buddha's name and snapped that warm arm at the elbow. It was an experience I never, ever want to go through again. Story number 4. When I was in grade 11, my grandmother passed away and was cremated. The whole family was heartbroken and didn't want to do it, but it was her final wish, so we had to respect it. When they opened the coffin, they found several pearls inside. My grandmother had a habit of taking off her jewelry after bathing, putting it in her pocket, and then forgetting to put it back on. So when she was cremated, none of us realized she still had a bracelet in her pocket. Since they were natural pearls, they didn't burn in the fire. The pearls were divided up, with each person receiving 2 as a keepsake from her. My dad gave me 1 and told me to put it inside a 3-jewels amulet pouch, hoping it would protect me. During my grandmother's 49-day mourning period, some of my friends invited me roller skating at a bookstore. The place has since been rebuilt into something else, so I won't mention its name. I don't want to affect the business that's there now. The bookstore had a ground floor that was actually the bookstore itself. There was also a mezzanine, kind of like the upper level in a duplex, which had been turned into a cafe, although it hadn't been open for a long time. The first floor was where they kept discarded items. It was fenced off, covered in dust, and the lights were never turned on. It looked incredibly gloomy. The second floor had the roller skating rink and a movie room. That floor was the strangest one. Mannequins were scattered everywhere, but most of them were missing body parts. The movie room was locked, and there was a red light glowing inside. The moment I stepped into that place, I started feeling short of breath and uneasy. I'd heard stories about supernatural things since I was little, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to scare my friends or ruin the fun. After about 30 minutes, I couldn't take it any more. I told my friends I was going downstairs to read instead. As I walked past the first floor, I kept feeling like someone was watching me. Then, while I was going down the stairs, I suddenly felt something push me from behind. Luckily, I managed to grab the railing and steady myself, then slowly made my way down one step at a time. Once I reached the ground floor, I looked back up to see if my friends had been messing with me. But what I saw was a red-faced demon wearing old-fashioned clothing. It had 2 long fangs and was just standing there staring at me. I was sweating with fear. I immediately ran over to the girls, Thungun and the others, and I refused to go upstairs again. Later, while I was sitting there reading, I kept feeling cold air blowing against the back of my neck. But there wasn't a fan anywhere, and the bookstore was completely empty, so the staff hadn't even turned on the air conditioning. Eventually, my friends came downstairs and we all left. I never told them what had happened to me. But here's the strange part. After that day, I realized the pearl I always carried with me was gone. The amulet pouch wasn't torn. I hadn't lost anything else. Only the pearl was missing. I searched everywhere, but I never found it. I'm convinced my grandmother was protecting me that day. And somehow that pearl took my place. About 2 weeks later, I heard my friends talking about why the bookstore had become so empty. Apparently, a man had once been using the washroom there when he suddenly started screaming. Everyone rushed in and found him sitting on the floor, saying he'd seen a red-faced demon. And apparently, people living nearby would occasionally see a shadowy figure wandering around outside. There was even a decorative rock garden near the entrance. One of my friend's younger cousins went roller skating there and was supposedly pushed by something, breaking their leg. And the strangest part was that everyone described the demon exactly the way I had seen it. Story number 5. I once saw my doppelganger. It happened on my way home from school. I had to walk along a road that cut through a field. As I was walking, I noticed some guy who looked exactly like me. I mean, ridiculously similar. When I got closer, I realized it really was my face, but something about him looked wrong. His skin was kind of gray, and there was something completely lifeless about him. I got scared and hurried away, but I was too curious, so I turned around to look again. At that exact moment, I wasn't paying attention to the road. My hand slipped on the handlebars, and I went straight into the field. I'm not even kidding. Story number 6. Back in 2019, during Lunar New Year, I went to a shrine dedicated to St. Mother Liu Hain, near the area where General Giap's village is located. I went there every year, and the place was considered very sacred. Personally, I never really asked for anything for myself because I always felt like I was doing fine. So that year, I decided to make a much bigger wish. I wished for everyone in the world to be healthy and safe in the new year. Then I tossed the coins to ask for a sign. Both coins landed on the same side, which meant the answer was no. I tried again, and again. I ended up tossing the coins 14 times, and every single time I got the same answer. Even the woman standing behind me was looking at me in disbelief. So I changed my request. This time, I simply asked for my best friend to stay healthy. I tossed the coins once and immediately got a yes. And we all know what happened in 2020. That's when the COVID 19 pandemic began, it made me realize something. Maybe even the gods have their limits. When karma comes due, no god can simply make it disappear. Maybe they're there as something for us to place our faith in, but they can't control everything. After the COVID pandemic, I became vegetarian, started practicing meditation, and eventually opened a vegetarian restaurant. I also started sensing spirits around me, and there was even one time when I actually saw one. I came to understand that the unseen world has always existed alongside us. But honestly, they're not necessarily as terrifying as people imagine. There's so much more to it, so much more. It's almost like discovering an entirely different world. Story number 7, animals. My landlord had a cat that was incredibly friendly. Almost every day when I came home from work, the cat would come out, stretch its shoulders, greet me, and rub itself against my legs. One day, I suddenly needed to use the bathroom, so I went into my landlord's washroom to use it. That's when I noticed the cat's name tag inside. I asked my landlord about it, and he told me the cat had died 2 months earlier from an intestinal illness. My God. Story number 8. I'm not sure if this was the scariest thing I've ever experienced, because who knows? Maybe I'll encounter something even worse someday. This happened before Lunar New Year. I was bored, so I went for a late-night walk around Ho Chi Minh City with a friend. We were around District 1, sometime between 1 and 2 in the morning. We stopped at a red light, and I looked to my right. That's when I saw the Ho Chi Minh City Museum of Fine Arts, and I suddenly said to my friend, "Hey, isn't this where the Hoor family ghost is supposed to be?" At the time, we were standing directly across from the museum's 3rd building, near the spiral staircase. If you've ever been there, you probably know the spot I'm talking about. I was just joking around. I said it casually and laughed about it. Then I went home, worked on a deadline for a while, and eventually went to sleep. But while I was sleeping, I suddenly jolted awake and found that I couldn't move my body. I was lying flat on my back with my hands resting on my stomach. Then, out of nowhere, my fingers started feeling like something was scratching or biting them. My whole body felt incredibly heavy, and I was struggling to breathe. I thought, okay, maybe I'm having sleep paralysis. Even opening my eyes felt difficult. When I managed to crack them open just a little, I remember seeing something leaning over me, supporting itself with both hands, and reaching toward my face above my hands. All I could really make out was a black, human-like figure. It seemed to be shaped like a woman, and I vaguely remember seeing what looked like teeth biting down. I didn't dare look any longer. I just closed my eyes, started chanting Buddha's name, and quietly apologized to her over and over again. Then, suddenly, it stopped. That was only the 2nd time in my life I'd experienced sleep paralysis. I'd never considered myself particularly spiritually vulnerable before. But after that night, I can honestly say it was the most terrifying episode of sleep paralysis I've ever experienced. One of the comments from another viewer said, "Hey, I think there might actually be an altar on the 2nd or 3rd floor of that building. I don't know why, but I suddenly went upstairs. There didn't seem to be anything protecting the place, so I thought there might still be something up there, but I was alone. I made it halfway up the stairs, and everything suddenly got dark. It looked like an altar. I was about to look closer when my sister suddenly ran up, grabbed me, pulled me back downstairs, and didn't say a single word. I replied, "That building really does have this suffocating feeling to it." And back then my friend was staying in the big building across from it. She said she had experienced something strange on the 2nd floor, too. Story number 9. This one happened in 2020. My family has a huge metal gate, but it had been sitting there for years and was getting really old and wobbly. It was so difficult to close that usually my dad or my older brother would take care of it. That night it was around 10 or 11 p.m. My parents had come home late from work and my older brother was downstairs. I was upstairs, talking on the phone with an older girl I knew, when I clearly saw a white figure glide past the front gate. I knew exactly what I'd seen, but I wasn't scared. Then, about 15 minutes later, I don't know what possessed me, but I suddenly decided to go outside and close the gate myself, even though I had no idea how to close it properly. And somehow the gate came crashing down on top of me while I was sleeping. Luckily, I swear my grandparents were watching over me, because I only ended up with a small scrape on my left hand. Story number 10. Do you believe that someone who has passed away can enter the body of a family member? I've witnessed it way too many times. When I was little, I didn't believe in any of this. But as I got older, I kept witnessing things that made me think the spiritual world really does exist alongside our everyday lives. One time, my older brother apparently entered my mom's body, and I was lying right beside her without realizing anything was happening. It wasn't until I saw my mom shaking uncontrollably and feeling ice cold that my dad realized something was wrong. My brother had drowned, and apparently he wanted my mom to cover herself with a blanket. My dad lit incense and started praying. But here's the strange part. I couldn't hear what my brother was saying through my mom. Only my dad could hear him. Looking back now, I've noticed something. Every time I've directly witnessed someone being possessed by a spirit, I've never been able to hear what the spirit was saying. Story number 11. I went to a funeral for an older relative on my dad's side of the family. I'd only just recovered from being sick, so I was still weak and hadn't gotten my strength back. But I loved and respected him, so I went anyway. While I was standing there among everyone else, I was the only person who could smell something. It was the overwhelming smell of burnt meat. I turned to my mom and told her I couldn't breathe. I was the only one who could smell that horrible burnt smell. My mom looked at me like I was crazy and said, "What smell? There's nothing here. Guys, it smelled insanely burnt." I couldn't breathe through my nose, my mouth, or even my throat properly. It felt like the smell was stuck inside my nostrils. Later, my aunt told someone to crush some betel leaves. The moment I smelled the crushed leaves, the burnt smell disappeared. And that's what really scared me. I was wearing several protective amulets, and I could still smell it. That smell was the smell of a human body being cremated, and even for several days afterward, I could still remember that exact smell. It stayed with me. I'm going to be scared of that smell for the rest of my life. Ever since then, whenever I go near a grave or attend a funeral, I carry betel leaves with me and smell them just in case. Story number 12. The feeling of encountering a ghost isn't necessarily cold. The first time I ever saw a ghost was in 2018. It was a little girl with messy, long hair. I saw her at a house on Tran Ba Giao Street in Go Vep District, Ho Chi Minh City. The first time I saw her, I was lying on a mattress facing the doorway. The lights were off. I had been holding my phone for a while, and when my arm got tired, I finally put it down. That's when she appeared. At first, she looked completely real. She seemed like an actual little girl, standing there, watching me while I lay in bed. And the feeling wasn't anything like what you see in horror movies. It didn't feel cold. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt real, until she started bothering me. Story number 13. I'll tell you 2 stories for this one. The first happened when I was a kid. I dreamed that my grandfather, who had already passed away, came to take me somewhere. He led me onto a bright red wedding sedan chair, carried by 8 people. I sat inside the sedan chair as my grandfather and the procession took me down a slope. Then, from the top of the hill, I heard my grandmother calling my name. I jumped out of the sedan chair and ran toward her. My entire body was covered in blood. But my grandfather just continued walking with the procession. Then he turned around, looked at me, and smiled. The second story is also about my grandfather. I was a little older when I had this dream. In it, my grandfather led me down into a stone underground chamber. Down there, it looked like some kind of entrance to a judgment hall. Hanging on the wall was a huge painting of a tiger's head made of bronze. There was also a Chinese official with a completely black face. He handed me a tiger-headed command tablet and told me it was a token that could spare me from death. Knock on wood, but ever since then, I've had all kinds of accidents. Some of them looked pretty serious, but somehow I always came out with nothing more than scratches, bruises, or minor injuries. Maybe my grandfather really was watching over me. Story number 14. This one happened in 2024. I believe a spirit followed me home from my high school. At first, all that happened was sleep paralysis. I didn't see anything, but I was completely aware that I was being held down. The first time it happened, I was absolutely terrified. Oh my God, I was freaking out. But after it happened more and more, I started becoming afraid to even go to sleep. I told my mom about it, but she didn't believe me. She said I was probably exhausted, and maybe my circulation was bad, so I was having weird dreams. At the time, I was in grade 12 and getting ready for my university entrance exams. I was already exhausted, and this kept happening. For more than 2 months, I'd wake up trapped in sleep paralysis, but I never saw anything. Then came the 3rd month. That night, I had sleep paralysis again. But this time, the room was still lit up in the dream. I was lying there when I heard my little sibling call out, "Big sis." The second I heard that voice, I turned around, and holy shit, the whole room suddenly went completely dark. Then I turned my head back so I was facing straight ahead, and out of the corner of my right eye I saw a black figure. Holy shit! It was ridiculously tall, probably close to 6 feet. That's when I knew for sure I was having sleep paralysis. But at that point I was actually pretty brave. So I turned and looked at it, and fuck, it smiled at me. All I could see were these incredibly white teeth, almost like they were glowing against the darkness. It was lying on its side, propping itself up on one arm while staring at me. I was scared enough to piss myself. And then it started tickling me. It kept tickling me until I couldn't take it anymore, and somehow that was what finally snapped me awake. I don't know why, but after that I was way too scared to go back to sleep. The next morning I told my mom what happened, and she just said, "It's nothing." But it turned out my mom had already gone to see a spiritual practitioner about it. She just hadn't told me. Then, right before the day we were supposed to make the offerings, I had another dream about the same thing. In the dream, I was lying in bed, messing around on my phone and talking to my friend. Then I suddenly heard someone yell, "Hey!" incredibly loudly. I turned around, and there it was again. The same thing. Still around 6 feet tall, standing right above the head of my bed. Then it suddenly flew toward me and grabbed me by the throat. Holy fucking shit. But I started chanting Buddha's name and managed to break free. After 3 months of sleep paralysis, I'd gotten pretty damn good at dealing with it. Eventually, my mom told me that the spirit was male and already quite old. Apparently, it had noticed me at my school, where my spiritual energy was considered weak, and followed me home. I was absolutely terrified when I heard that. Story number 15. My mom told me about something that happened when I was little. I was only 4 years old. She had picked me up from school and was taking me home. I was a very energetic kid back then, always running around, always getting into things. My dad was away on a business trip in northern Vietnam at the time. On the way home from school, my mom thinks we passed through somewhere that caused a spirit to follow us home and enter me. Once we got home, I suddenly stopped playing. Instead, I just lay on the bed. My mom thought it was strange, so she came over and asked me, "What if you don't go out and play anymore?" And the spirit inside me answered, "I don't have any legs to walk with." My mom completely panicked. It was just the two of us at home. At first, she thought I was joking around, so she tried teasing me. She said, "Of course you have legs. Look, they're right here." But I kept insisting that I didn't have any legs. That's when she started getting really scared. My mom tried to get off the bed, but I grabbed her and wouldn't let go. And think about it, how could a 4-year-old possibly hold an adult down like that? But that's exactly what happened. My mom said I was gripping her so tightly that she couldn't move. She had to struggle with everything she had just to get free. Eventually, she managed to grab her phone and call my uncle, who lived nearby. He came over and used a traditional folk method involving salt and pepper water to restrain whatever was inside me. The next morning, they took me to a Buddhist temple. I stayed there for about a month before coming home. But after I returned, something strange happened to my leg. It developed a serious condition. My family took me everywhere looking for treatment, but nothing ever worked. What made it even stranger was that the condition would come and go. Sometimes my leg would become swollen, painful, and incredibly itchy. It looked awful. Sometimes both of my legs would become so bad that I couldn't even walk. But then, once the season changed, my legs would suddenly become completely clear, as if nothing had ever happened. Eventually, my family got so frustrated that they decided to stop trying to treat it. Then my mom met a woman through work. They became friends and eventually went out together. I went along with my mom, and that was the first time I met this woman. The next day, she saw my mom again and told her that she'd noticed a young child spirit following me. At first, she hadn't wanted to say anything because she was afraid my mom wouldn't believe her. But that night, after we'd gone out together, she went home to sleep and dreamed about me. I was there in the dream, and the same spirit was with me. That's when she told my mom that she needed to take me to a temple with her. So she took me to a Buddhist temple, where we met a relatively young monk who was also the head monk of the temple. The moment I walked in, he stared at me for a long time. Then he kept shaking his head. Finally, he said, "The spirit following you is a child. It's a male spirit." My mom told him what had happened when I was 4. The spirit that had possessed me had also been a young boy around my age. He immediately understood. Then he looked at my leg and said that the child's spirit had been following me and had attached itself to my leg. After that, he performed a ritual. At the time, my leg was in really bad shape. But once he finished, I went home. And suddenly my leg didn't hurt or itch any more. Within about a week, my leg had completely cleared up. There was nothing left. But during that period when my leg was healing, I had the same nightmare every single night. I would dream that someone was choking me. Sometimes I could even feel the pain in my leg inside the dream. It hurt so badly that I couldn't walk. After about a month, the problem with my leg came back. My mom asked the woman what was going on, and she said the spirit had been following me for more than 12 years. It still hadn't moved on. And during the period when I was getting better, that woman said the spirit had also been bothering her constantly. Story number 16. I'll keep this one short. A friend of mine told me about someone they knew who owned a funeral home. One night, around 9 or 10 p.m., someone knocked on the door and asked to borrow some money. My friend was tired, so they lent the person some money. In return, the person left behind a calligraphy brush, the kind of brush sometimes associated with Kinteen-style writing. A few days later, the funeral home owner's son picked up the brush and started writing with it. Somehow, the brush wrote the name of a distant relative. A few days later, that relative died. Then the brush was used again, and it wrote down the names of several other people. They all died too. A few days later, the person who had originally borrowed the money came back, took the brush, and returned the money. Here's another story. One of my friends is a surgeon. Both male and female doctors worked there. During a lot of overnight shifts, 11 p.m., 1 a.m., 3 a.m., my friend would stand in front of the mirror in the changing room, brushing their hair and looking at their reflection. Nothing ever happened. They've been doing this job for about 4 years now. There have been plenty of cases where patients died on the operating table, so if you believe in this kind of thing, you'd probably expect the place to have a lot of spiritual energy. But despite spending so many nights brushing their hair in front of a mirror, my friend has never actually encountered a ghost that way. They've experienced strange things in the operating room, though. I'll tell you about those stories another time, whenever I feel like writing them. I'm getting lazy again. Story number 17. Let me tell you about this one. One time, I randomly went to Dalat for a trip, and by coincidence, an older guy I knew happened to be there too. So I left my homestay and went out to hang out with him. By the time I was heading back, it was already around 9 p.m. This was sometime in the 2010s, when Dalat was still incredibly quiet at night. I was riding along when a woman suddenly came up beside me and shouted, "Why are you two going so fast?" I looked over at her. She looked at me and suddenly got scared and sped away. The problem was, I was riding alone. Earlier that evening, when my friend and I had been riding together, we'd reached this particular hill. It was dark, and both of us clearly saw the silhouette of a tall man standing there. As soon as we started riding up the hill, my bike suddenly tipped over sideways. When I looked up again, there was no one there. Story number 18. When I was little, probably around grade 1 or 2, I went outside to play around 9 p.m. That's when I clearly saw my mom standing out on the road. She was wearing exactly the same clothes she'd been wearing that day. I got so excited that I ran over shouting, "Mom!" I grabbed her hand and started walking with her like everything was completely normal. Right beside our house was a family tomb, the kind families build for their grandparents and relatives. So naturally, I was terrified of going outside at night. And somehow, this version of my mom was leading me straight toward that tomb. We were getting really close when I suddenly snapped out of it. I looked up and said, "Mom, why are you taking me over here?" And then, holy shit! Her face was completely pale. Her eyes didn't have any visible pupils at all. I wrote this story at around 3 in the morning, while lying right beside my mom. She was asleep, and I was literally crying from fear. I panicked and ran all the way back home. When I got into the kitchen, my actual mom was there cleaning up after dinner. She looked at me and asked, "Why were you calling me earlier?" I didn't answer you. To this day, I genuinely don't know whether it was a dream or something that actually happened, because I remember every single detail so clearly. I asked her, "Were you outside just now?" She said no. She'd been in the kitchen the entire time. What the fuck? Did I actually get led outside by a ghost? And if it was a ghost, how could I have been led outside when I was supposedly inside the whole time? Can someone please explain this to me? I still remember everything so clearly. And if it really was just a dream, can you remember a dream this vividly for this many years? Story number 19. It was around 10 p.m. Everyone in the house was still awake, but we'd turned off all the lights. My younger brother and I decided to go downstairs and fry some sausages because we were hungry. My family lives in a traditional one-story house in northern Vietnam, and to get to the kitchen you have to cross a small courtyard. The moment we stepped outside, I noticed something near the dog kennel. There was this vague silhouette that looked like an adult standing there. I thought maybe I was imagining it. My little brother ran over to the kennel because he needed to grab something hanging up to dry above it. That's when I looked back and saw it clearly. There was a headless person standing right there. It was wearing a blue button-up shirt and jeans ripped at the knees. And for some reason, I was strangely calm. I just walked into the kitchen. I wasn't scared. I wasn't panicking. I was looking for the sausages when my brother came inside. His face was completely white. He looked at me and said, "Bro, this is creepy. I think I saw someone standing by that tree. I tried to calm him down." I said, "It's not like it's just going to walk into our house. What's there to be scared of?" The second I finished saying that, we heard heavy footsteps pounding across the courtyard. Boom, boom, boom. My brother and I froze. We grabbed our stuff and ran back upstairs. I told him to go inside first and said I'd follow behind him. But before I went in, I turned around one more time. The headless figure was still standing right in the middle of the courtyard. Its neck was completely severed, and bright red blood was pouring down from it. That's when I finally lost it. I was absolutely terrified. Story number 20. Here's another one from the military area. A bunch of us were staying in a building that was painted yellow. Apparently one of the girls in our room was more spiritually sensitive than the rest of us. She dreamed about a woman wearing purple clothes, wandering around and rummaging through everyone's belongings. Another girl was sleeping facing the wall when the woman supposedly came over and stroked her back. When everyone started comparing their dreams afterward, most of the people sleeping in that area had dreamed about the exact same woman. We told our instructor about it, the military guy stationed there, and he said, "Nobody in my room can sleep properly either." She keeps bothering us. There are actually more stories from that place, but I'm way too sleepy to keep writing. It's already 2 a.m. I'm done for tonight, so I'm going to bed. Thanks to all my lovely wives for listening all the way to the end. Get yourselves ready for the next video, because there are plenty more stories coming.